If you all have been following my presentations on healing and taking back your power, as I call it, and the same message will keep coming up. It is still possible to manifest what you want, to not only increase your frequency, but also help others and humanity at the same time, by simply being in the moment, as long as possible, whenever you can, in order to manifest more positive energy to assist the all. I am so impressed and grateful to introduce to you this method from Eckhart Tolle, again so simple yet so effective. Please support his work and learn what it means to find yourself. Links are listed below. Thank you, Eckhart.
Chapter 3. Moving Deeply into the Now.
I feel that there is still a great deal I need to learn about the workings of my mind before I can get anywhere near full consciousness or spiritual enlightenment.
No, you don't. The problems of the mind cannot be solved on the level of the mind. Once you've understood the basic dysfunction, there isn't really much else that you need to learn or understand. Studying the complexity of the mind may make you a good psychologist, but doing so won't take you beyond the mind, just as the study of madness isn't enough to create sanity. You have already understood the basic mechanics of the unconscious state, identification with the mind, which creates a false sense of self, the ego, as a substitute for your true self rooted in being. You become as a branch cut off from the vine, as Jesus puts it. The ego's needs are endless. It feels vulnerable and threatened, and so lives in a state of fear and want. Once you know how the basic dysfunction operates, there's no need to explore all its countless manifestations, no need to make it into a complex personal problem. The ego, of course, loves that. It is always seeking for something to attach itself to in order to uphold and strengthen its illusory sense of self, and it will readily attach itself to your problems. This is why, for so many people, a large part of their sense of self is intimately connected with their problems. Once this has happened, the last thing they want is to become free of them. That would mean loss of self. There can be a great deal of unconscious ego investment in pain and suffering. So once you recognize the root of unconsciousness as identification with the mind, which of course includes the emotions, you step out of it. You become present. When you are present, you can allow the mind to be as it is without getting entangled in it. The mind in itself is not dysfunctional. It is a wonderful tool. Dysfunction sets in when you seek yourself in it and mistake it for who you are. It then becomes the egoic mind and takes over your whole life.
It seems almost impossible to disidentify from the mind. We are all immersed in it. How do you teach a fish to fly?
Here's the key. End the delusion of time. Time and mind are inseparable. Remove time from the mind and it stops, unless you choose to use it. To be identified with your mind is to be trapped in time, the compulsion to live almost exclusively through memory and anticipation. This creates an endless preoccupation with past and future and an unwillingness to honor and acknowledge the present moment and allow it to be. The compulsion arises because the past gives you an identity, and the future holds the promise of salvation, of fulfillment in whatever form. Both are illusions.
But without a sense of time, how would we function in this world? There would be no goals to strive toward anymore, I wouldn't even know who I am because my past makes me who I am today. I think time is something very precious, and we need to learn to use it wisely rather than waste it.
Time isn't precious at all, because it is an illusion. What you perceive as precious is not time, but the one point that is out of time, the now. That is precious indeed. The more you are focused on time, past and future, the more you miss the now, the most precious thing there is. Why is it the most precious thing? Firstly, because it is the only thing. It's all there is. The eternal present is the space within which your whole life unfolds, the one factor that remains constant. Life is now. There was never a time when your life was not now, nor will there ever be. Secondly, the now is the only point that can take you beyond the limited confines of the mind. It is your only point of access into the timeless and formless realm of being.
Aren't past and future just as real, sometimes even more real than the present? After all, the past determines who we are, as well as how we perceive and behave in the present, and our future goals determine which actions we take in the present.
You haven't yet grasped the essence of what I'm saying because you're trying to understand it mentally. The mind cannot understand this. Only you can. Please just listen. Have you ever experienced, done, thought, or felt anything outside the now? Do you think you ever will? Is it possible for anything to happen or be outside the now? The answer is obvious, is it not? Nothing ever happened in the past. It happened in the now. Nothing will ever happen in the future. It will happen in the now. What you think of as the past is a memory trace stored in the mind of a former now. When you remember the past, you reactivate a memory trace, and you do so now. The future is an imagined now, a projection of the mind. When the future comes, it comes as the now. When you think about the future, you do it now. Past and future obviously have no reality of their own. Just as the moon has no light of its own, but can only reflect the light of the sun, so are past and future only pale reflections of the light, power and reality of the eternal present. Their reality is borrowed from the now. The essence of what I am saying here cannot be understood by the mind. The moment you grasp it, there's a shift in consciousness from mind to being, from time to presence. Suddenly, everything feels alive, radiates energy, emanates being. So the true meaning of retreat is the retreat from your usual self, from your usual mentally constructed, mentally, emotionally constructed self. And if everything else is really happens on the surface of life. Now, what happens on the surface of life can be very helpful, and this is why we're here. It can be very helpful. It helps you to begin to let go of your identification with your usual self. And then realize, and of course many of you have already started or are well into that process of disidentification, which we could also call the awakening process. Most of you are already engaged in the awakening process, has become initiated in you, and then you are here in order to deepen it. And some of you may not yet even know, there may be a few who may not even know at this moment what I'm referring to when I say awakening. But you will. Unless you run away tomorrow already. Just give yourself a chance. So there is the surface self, that is the usual self that everybody has. And for many people who have not yet awakened, that's all they have, or all they think they have. It's like saying you have an enormous amount of wealth, but you don't know it. So it's as if you didn't have it. So when I say they don't have it, it really means they don't know that there is a deeper dimension to who they are. And that is the real meaning that is really true deprivation, of really not knowing who you are on the deeper level of your being. So there is the usual self and there is the deeper self. And we are here retreating. The purpose is to retreat from the usual self and discover who you are underneath the usual self, who or what you are. And that discovery does not happen conceptually. After this retreat, on the last day, you may not be able to say much more about your real self, your true, deeper self, than you are now, and yet you might have experienced it very deeply and be in touch with it very deeply. But what can you say about it? What can I say about my deeper self? It's hard to say anything because it does not live in the world of conceptualization. And you first encounter it in a moment of stillness, alert stillness, like now, where you don't need to know your name, you don't need to remember what your name is right now in order to be here fully. You don't need to remember your personal history right now in order to be here fully and be fully yourself. You do not need to remember your personal history in order to get that sense of being fully present and being fully yourself. And that's quite amazing. So you can sense something, there is a sense of aliveness or presence that has nothing to do with your personal history, or your name, or your background, or whether in the eyes of the world you are a huge success or a huge failure. Nothing to do with that. So because there we move deeper. And so it's intangible. You can never say, I have found it now. I have found my deeper self. No, you can't. It doesn't work like that. It cannot become an object in your consciousness. Because when you say, I have found something, there must be something that arises in your field of consciousness as an object in consciousness. You see something, you hear something, you think of something. A sense perception arises as something in your field of consciousness. I'm looking at the table. I have found the table. Or an idea comes into your head. I have found the answer as an idea. But the depth of who you are, that we could also call the transcendent dimension, can never be experienced in that way as an object to your perception or consciousness, because it is the eternal subject, it is the I. So you cannot know yourself in a subject-object relationship. You know yourself as consciousness. Not conscious of something, but conscious. And that's the sense of, the deepest sense of beingness or I that you can sense within yourself right now. Why not now? Why wait until the last day of the retreat and say, oh, finally I got it? What, get it already? It does not take time to be who you are. Quote from A Course in Miracles. Or if you want the complete quote, it has taken time to misguide you so completely, but it takes no time at all to be who you are. And this is why I go to already in the introductory session to the very core of what this is about, instead of saying, just wait, on day 2 I will get you closer, and on day 3 you get just wait, you'll get there. It's always here now. You are always here now. Let's go back to this strange thing of, in order to sense your own presence, which is not your own, we just call it your own temporarily. Nothing is your own. In order to sense your own presence, you don't need to remember your past. In fact, if you think about your past, it takes you away from sensing the fullness of being of your own presence, because you drift off into and you can see you're not here. You're in dreamland, a kind of hypnosis, hypnotized by your mind. Or in the middle of the night it goes, my problems, me and my problems. And many people define their identity primarily as a set of problems that need to be solved. And one day they hope they will arrive at that point when their problematic self has become resolved. But it never does. You are not a set of problems that you need to resolve.